Hi, good afternoon. Hello, hello, hello. Can I draw your attention to here? Yes. All right. Yeah. You stopped? Okay. All right. Perfect. No, now no more. Yeah. We're just ready to go. Yeah, sure. We'll start in a minute. We just want our colleagues to set up the tech and we'll be good to go. Thank you. Thank you so much for your patience. Yeah. Hello again. Good afternoon. And I'm sure there are a lot of people connected online with us today. So good morning, evening, good night, depending on where you're connecting from today. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and partners, welcome to this side event on building inclusive economies in the Global South via green, industrial, and productive development, which has been co-organized by ECLAC, UNIDO, the Open Society Foundations, ILO, UN Women, and the UNFCCC. I am honored to be your moderator this afternoon. My name is Venge Nyirongo, and I work with UN Women, leading our engagement in the multilateral environmental agreements. So, why are we here? We are gathered here at COP30 to explore green industrial policies and how they can serve as a coherent cornerstone for inclusive and sustainable development, enabling emerging economies to seize the opportunities of a global green transition. This session is going to feature a UN perspective that will spotlight the strategic importance of industrial and productive development policies in linking climate action with economic and social progress. Our discussion is going to underscore how international cooperation, climate finance, and technology transfer help countries in the Global South, particularly emerging economies, become competitive suppliers of green goods and services, ensuring that no one is left behind. It's my honor to introduce our distinguished panel this afternoon. And as I mention your name, please do come forward to take your seat in front. The first one I'm going to call in front is Mr. Daniele Violetti, who is the Senior Director of Programs Coordination at the UNFCCC. Daniele provides strategic oversight across adaptation, mitigation, transparency, and means of implementation, I think, just to mention a few of the things that keep him busy. The next one I'm going to call to the front is Mr. Seong Zhu, who is the Deputy to the Director General and Managing Director of Technology, Cooperation, and Sustainable Industrial Development at UNIDO. And Seong leads efforts to advance sustainable industrial strategies globally, among the very many things that he does. The next one I'm going to call to the front is Ms. Luz Maria de la Mora, who is the Director of the Division of International Trade and Commodities at UNCTAD. Luz has decades of experience shaping international trade policy and negotiations, and we're really glad to have you here on the panel. The next speaker for this afternoon session is Ms. Camila Gramco, who is Acting Director of ECLAC's Brasilia office. And Camila is an expert in climate change economics and green growth strategies across Latin America. So really glad to have you here. Don't we have a gender balanced panel today? Yeah? Wonderful. So, dear friends, guests, you may have seen that in the concept note we're supposed to hear from His Excellency Alckmin, who is the Vice President of Brazil and Minister for Development, Industry and Trade and Services. But unfortunately, circumstances have dictated that we won't be having him this afternoon. But we are in the very good hands of our distinguished panelists, and so why don't we get going? So I'm going to invite our speakers this afternoon, and I think we can mix it up a little bit to hear from their insights on how we can collectively shape a robust, inclusive, and forward-looking approach to green industry and productive development in the Global South. So why don't we start with you, Daniele? Your perspective from the UNFCCC. Could you share it with us, please?
Thank you. And I hope you can hear me, and fine, thanks. Well, let me start for thanking the organizer and all our partners, ECLAC, UNIDO, UNCTAD, ILO, UN Women, and all of you in putting together this event. I think I will like to come into this conversation from the angle of the opportunity offered now by the new round of NDCs in the climate change process, as we have finally completed the first policy cycle 10 years after the Paris Agreement. And in the new NDCs, in what we are seeing now, so we have done our synthesis report, and apart from having a positive signal that we are really having a ratcheting mechanism that is working, even if we don't have the full number of NDC we are expecting, but those we have been seeing and receiving, they are putting us on a good trajectory, but we are not yet in the scale and speed that we need to meet the Paris Agreement goal. And what we have seen that now that NDCs are finally covering whole of economy, whole of society, that we have to look at industrial development in a new angle, which is no longer looking at only as a hard-to-abate sector, but actually to offer an opportunity for a different type of development, and having decarbonization targets clearly embedded in NDCs or long-term strategy, even better, can really make the difference in giving these policy signals that are needed by those sectors if they want really to make a change in terms of not only decarbonization, but then having the opportunity to change economic sectors, creating new jobs, creating all the incentives that we are looking at, and the benefits that can come to that. So it's no longer energy-driven NDC that we are looking at in what we are seeing, but it's really a different approach that is coming out. Now we have, and this is for developing countries in particular, is essential because this new opportunity will create, in the context of supply chains, this green change that is really needed. And that's also very important for trade as well, of course, but then having these targets being aligned also with the broad climate change goals create this opportunity for trade as well. So what I think is missing at this point are those clear, strong policy signals. And that's why I'm saying that it's encouraging what we are seeing in the new round of NDCs. We have only, not even 70 NDCs on board. We are still missing quite a large number, 120 or so. So are these those that will take us until 2035 in the correct direction, so that we can really looking at that. Now, there are still very important industry sectors that are hard to abate. Of course, we know that. From steel, cement, we know that the conversion goes into a more sustainable path path is possible, and there are efforts being made, and I'm sure we're going to hear more from the other speakers. But what is important, I think, that with international cooperation, those opportunities are seized now, and technology transfer remains at the center of all this, and the availability of this new technology for developing countries in order to implement these policies and the goals that they have also for the industry sector. So that's a quick snapshot on our point of view, saying that fundamentally we are seeing positive signal, very strong NDCs, whole of economy, more sectors included, particularly also adaptation that has been a bit left out before, but now is there. And then out of this, the policies that are needed for looking at industry as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniele, and really glad to hear you reminding us of how central the NDCs are in national development, trade, and other economic and social sectors. Why don't we now move to our next speaker? And I'm going to move to Luz. If you could share with us your perspective from UNCTAD. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting UNCTAD to participate in this very timely event that we think fits very well with the place where we are with the Amazon. It is, for us, an issue that is not only about climate, but more importantly, it is about transformation. Transforming how countries produce, how countries trade, how they create value, and most importantly, to ensure that the green transition is really an opportunity to improve the lives of people. We think that this is the only way in which we will build an inclusive and sustainable economy. So let me touch on a couple of points where UNCTAD sees this transformation into green and greening of industrial policy. First of all, industrial policy is at the center of the debate today, but industrial policy has to be reimagined. It cannot be the same as in the past, and it cannot be left at the as a second level priority. However, industrial policy is not only about manufacturing, it is also about services, the digital economy, and also, and more importantly, how to make our economy a sustainable one. And this is something that obviously resonates very well in Belém in this COP. So for that, we need to align research and development, we need to align financing, we need to align export programs. So this is why industrial policy can be a bridge between climate goals and inclusive development. Industrial policy should be able to reconcile growth with low emissions, or preferably zero emissions, and ensuring also that it's an economy that can create good jobs, well-paid jobs, and socially inclusive. So the second point that I'd like to make has to do with finance. We need, ambition requires resources. It requires money. It requires financing. So financing low-carbon development probably is one of the most important and defining challenges of this decade. We know that the transition cost for emerging economies entails trillions of dollars. The urgency is clear, and I think that in this COP, we have listened to several panels, discussions, debate that underscore that global clean energy investment has already reached a record of $1 trillion in 2024, but, and I want to underscore, but renewable energy investment requires much more higher investment. For example, in the last 2-3 years, in 23 there was an increase of 19%, and in 22 of 23%. But recently we have seen a decline in investment, and that's not the path to move forward. So what we want to advocate here is to mobilize public and private finance and also to ensure that green funds reach productive sectors, that they reach the small ones, the small and medium-sized companies, and local communities, because without accessible financing, we will not be able to deliver on the promise of green industrialization. My third point has to do with a point that has already been made by our UNIDO colleague that has to do with cooperation. International cooperation is vital for green industrialization. No country can really achieve this kind of transformation by itself. So multilateral cooperation is essential to make trade, finance, and technology work together for development. South-South cooperation is essential and offers enormous potential in terms of learning experiences, building joint solutions, and regional cooperation can be also an operational backbone for green industrialization. Our partnership, for example, between UNCTAD and ECLAC under the UN Development Account Project Green Transformation in Latin America is a good example of this South-South cooperation and this regional cooperation, because it combines ECLAC's experience on production structures with UNCTAD's work on trade and industrial policy. And in this way, we are able to help governments design coherent strategies and policies that link competitiveness, trade, investment, and sustainability. In this way, we work in UNCTAD's historic mission, which is to offer a space where developing countries build consensus around a shared forward-looking vision for development. And my last point is our role in global green industrialization agenda. At UNCTAD, we work on several areas of support for the green industrialization: industrial policy design, trade and investment, productive capacity development, and climate vulnerability assessments. In this way, by combining this set of policies and areas, we aim at ensuring that global decarbonization also delivers development dividends. We cannot forget about development. So we have developed a 360-degree program on trade and climate policy that helps developing countries to integrate sustainability standards into trade and production, that helps them attract green investment, diversify exports through eco-innovation, and assessment of the impacts of border carbon measures. So UNCTAD stands ready to work with all partners within the UN family, with governments and private sector, to make low-carbon industrialization a pillar of sustainable development to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luz. I really enjoy how that connects to Daniele's points about NDCs becoming even more and more overarching and connecting with green industrial policies, but also really how you bring that to making sure that it's not just about climate, but it must also be anchored in transformation for people and planet. So thank you so much for sharing the UNCTAD perspective. Dear friends, I would like now to turn to UNIDO and Sion. What would you tell us from the perspective of UNIDO on how we can actually improve inclusive green industrial policies?
Thank you. First of all, I would say it's a great pleasure for me to join this esteemed panel and to focus on that this subject very dear to UNIDO's mandate. Basically, UNIDO that is a special agency mandated to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development for developing and emerging markets, economies. So with this in mind, I see the inclusiveness, basically inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Here, this subject today is really very well aligned with UNIDO mandate, so very dear to my heart. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure. I think talk about the inclusive economy for global south, we need to understand firstly, and we talk about this Paris Agreement, the 1.5-degree target. For global south, there is a kind of like a very strategic role. You cannot really say achieve this goal without the involvement and contribution from the global source. But how? The issue is how. So the corporate process has already some kind of mechanisms, say, to support the global source that could be able to, say, make due contribution through what? The financing mechanism, the technology, say, kind of mechanism. So above all, I think this is basically has something to do with industrial and productive development in global south. So for this to happen, I think this morning we announced with the leadership of Brazil and the COP30 presidency, the Penang Declaration on green industrialization. I would say this is very timely, very timely. I was informed now, as of now, this declaration has received, I think, endorsement of 12 countries and more than 20 partner agencies. So the number of countries to support this, say, is growing. Yeah. So we are very proud of this. UNIDO is really a part of this process because this is kind of our mandate, our daily job. But in terms of industrial policy, I would say there are lots of debate as of now in the academia world, also in the real world. But for us, for UNIDO, we believe that the industrial policy that should be that an instrument to leverage basically the investment from, I think, business, government, that into the green industrialization process. But the issue is that whether we should say follow the old fashion of industrial policy, that by picking up winners. No, absolutely not. We encourage this kind of like industrial policy that could say focus on creating an enabling environment, level playing field, yeah, to allow different players to do their job. So this is a kind of good combination of that efficient and effective government role as well as proactive role of the market. So in this phase, in this regard, I think for us also as an international organization, we need to play a role to facilitate this kind of like best practice kind of exchanges in the field of policy making. For example, all the industrial policies need to be, say, developed in, say, together with your policy on energy, on also, say, economic transformation broadly, right? Or trade policy as well. This is something you cannot treat it alone. So that's why, for us, say, energy security, important. Even, say, this kind of like, say, social protection, important. Because job creation, you need to think about how this industry policy could be able to create jobs. What kind of jobs? From where? So this is, I think, important for you to use this industry policy instrument, like a fiscal policy, tax policy, right? Even, say, I would say competition policy, right? So I think all this in mind, so you could be considered when you develop this kind of policy to ensure the inclusiveness, yeah? Not only at the country level, also at the global level. That's the role of international organizations, to facilitate this kind of dialogue and the conversation. Because industry policy always is made at the national level, yeah? But your industry policy, in particular for those bigger economies, you have spillover effect through trade flows, right? So that's why this comes in the angle of trade policy. How to align your industry policy with trade policy. So we need now basically also investment policy. So all these policies, whatever, need to say aligned. Then the international organizations like WTO, like UNCTAD and UNIDO, really, we could work together. We should work together to advise the member states how to promote cooperation, collaboration. It's not just say one winner takes everything. We need this kind of like say spirit to create a win-win situation for everybody. So also this kind of level playing ground, so important, not only for your domestic market, also for global market, for this green industrialization. So with this in mind, I really say I would like to use this occasion to invite really all government and also partner agencies to join the Penang Declaration to promote growing industrialization, particularly in the global south. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siong. And indeed, just reiterating the call to join the Belém Declaration. We will take that away with us today. Friends, I know we're running out of time, but we did have Camila who wanted to share the ECLAC perspective. Why don't I give you about 2 minutes, if you can just quickly run through what I'm sure is a very long list of issues you would like to discuss with us.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so good afternoon. I'll pass the salutations, but just to say that we're very happy at ECLAC to partner with UNIDO and UNCTAD and Open Society Foundations on this event. Thank you also for UNSCCC for hosting us. The most important part of this event is to learn about what the countries are actually doing and what inspirational narratives and concrete actions are being taken today, which is Industry Day at COP30. I only have a couple of minutes, so I would like to highlight the most important messages that we at ECLAC have on the topic of green and inclusive productive development policies. You can see on the reports on the screen the link to our reports, and in this year's panorama of productive development policies in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a special chapter dedicated to investigating and assessing green and inclusive productive development policies in Latin America and the Caribbean. Perhaps a couple of messages that are most important in our assessment. The first one is that climate change is not neutral from a development perspective, in the sense that climate change aggravates the structural problems that Latin American and Caribbean economies face. But on the other hand, and this is the emphasis of the report, there are multiple development opportunities arising from the climate agenda if and when we include the dimension of productive development. It is the development of productive value chains of international cooperation that will allow Latin American and Caribbean countries, as well as the South countries, to translate the green, resilient, sustainable investments agenda also into an agenda that represents productive inclusion, creation of jobs, enhancing formality, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time, but I invite you all to read the report, to see the messages that we have. We analyze the policies that are in place in the region, and this is a moment in which there is a new generation of productive development policies that have an explicit emphasis on the green, and this represents a major historic opportunity for the developments in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Camila. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure moderating this session. Thank you so much for your insights. As we move to the next session, I'm going to ask you to take your seats. Thank you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Carvalho. I'm the Director for Economic and Climate Prosperity at the Open Society Foundations. I will invite our panelists, Julia Cruz, Secretary for Green Economy, Decarbonization and Bioindustry at the Ministry of Development and Industry of Brazil. Ivan Cruz, same last name, Director of Financial Mechanisms and Portfolio Management at the Vice Ministry and Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources of Dominican Republic, and Ambassador Ali Daud Mohammed, Kenya's Special Envoy for Climate Change. I will take the chair to moderate this panel. And I would like to start with Ambassador Ali. I know Kenya is not only at the national level adopting a green industrialization strategy, but it's also leading a coordinated, and I would say the first concrete coordinated initiative for green industrialization at the regional level, the African Green Industrialization Initiative. that has Kenya on the lead, that has been announced in the Africa Climate Summit a couple of years ago, but that we are really interested in knowing more of, since I think other developing countries are also seeing the need for such a mechanism for coordination at the sectoral level of our industrialization strategy. So I would ask you, Ambassador Ali, to speak both to the Kenyan agenda, but also to that coordinated effort agenda and what it can offer as lesson for others.
Well, thank you very much, and glad to join this important discussion. As we all know, industrialization, of course, is the future. We come from Africa. Africa currently is 1.5 billion people. We are growing to 2.5 billion in a few years, 2050. And all that requires, it requires trade, it requires employment, it requires opportunities. So we hosted 2 African Climate Summits. The first one was in Nairobi in 2023, and the other one was this year in Addis Ababa. And therein, Africa put its best leg forward. And what we said is, Africa has both the potential and the ambition to support and contribute positively to the global decarbonization agenda. With such a huge population that is growing, with a population that is youngest in the world, and with opportunities and resources, both natural resources, whether you talk of mineral resources, whether you talk of forestry resources and other resources, the opportunity for the world to decarbonize will best be achieved in the African continent, which is the fastest growing in the whole world. And therefore, in the Africa Climate Summit, both in Nairobi and the subsequent one, what the leadership of Africa put forward was climate positive growth. So our agenda was, of course, in the past, we all know that vulnerability is a big issue. Africa has been the most vulnerable, and other global south countries. But just not that. We have the opportunity to provide solutions to the world. And therefore, we put together an initiative that we are calling Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, that is co-led by a number of heads of state and government, and now has become the African agenda at the continental level. We have brought together a number of private sector institutions as well as the financial institutions. The biggest challenge, of course, in industrialization is investment. And Africa is always perceived to be the riskiest for investment. And so we brought together African FIDs, FDIs. We brought together African MDBs. We brought together African regional commercial banks to work together and raise the resources required to make investments bankable. I mean, we all know the biggest challenge that the world faces, particularly the global south world, is bankability of projects. And so in Addis Ababa in September, we had the financial institutions, African MDBs and African commercial institutions, and they put together a portfolio, a facility of up to $100 billion US, all African, to help in directing investments for the various private sector that is interested. Currently, of course, the technology is improving. A lot of opportunities are happening around the world with regard to green industrialization. The transport sector is leading. There is EV is leapfrogging. I am sure here in Latin America, and everywhere else in the world, EVs are and clean technologies for transportation are leapfrogging. The whole issue of data centers is also becoming a big opportunity. I come from Kenya, and in Kenya we have 93% of our energy system clean. And therefore we provide opportunity to really make the investment real green, because there are a number of facilities that are calling themselves green, but the inflow or incoming energies are not green. And so in Africa, in Kenya, and many others where the energy is already green, like in Kenya, it actually makes it green. So we are attracting a lot of investments coming in, and there are so many private sector companies that are currently coming in. The area of SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, sustainable maritime fuel, the whole issue of hydrogen is getting a lot of traction, and we are providing the necessary investments as Kenya, as Africa, to put the necessary policies to continue attracting more and more. And we are glad that there's a good uptake in most places, and we hope that that is going to grow. As I say that, of course, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, the contribution of Africa in manufacturing is still minuscule. It is just 2% of the global manufacturing capacity. Despite the resources, whether it is human resources, whether it is mineral resources and other resources, renewable energy resources, I haven't mentioned, you know, the biggest potential of renewable energy, solar, wind, and geothermal is found in Africa. Unfortunately, somebody else here earlier mentioned, there's a lot of investment going into renewable energy, 2 to 1 in terms of fossil fuel to renewable. But there's a lot of disparity and inequalness in that investment. $2.2 trillion from IEA and IRENA, I think, report, but that goes to just a few countries. So despite all that, Africa's contribution to global manufacturing is still a minuscule 2%. And so we need to work together, and I heard the gentleman from UNIDO mentioning a declaration. We will explore that and interrogate it and see how such declarations will provide opportunities for disadvantaged parts of the globe, including Africa. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think this speaks to what I want to ask Julia, the secretary from Brazil. I think in Brazil face similar opportunities in terms of renewable energy potential, and have been centering these opportunities in certain clean tech and like biofuels, biofertilizers, bioinputs, sustainable aviation fields, and the power shoring possibilities that the clean energy matrix offers to advance a new industrial strategy that the Ministry of Development and Industry is, together with other agencies like the National Development Bank, are already moving forward. So, Julia, how does the Brazilian experience, what does it tell you in terms of how to translate these natural resources or these capabilities into concrete value addition, job generation, and what do you see for Brazil the role of regional coordination, which is something that I think in the African context is already a reality because of even survival, right? The African countries have understood the need to coordinate. I don't think Latin America is there yet, but I know you've put forward the declaration on global green industrialization, the Belém Declaration. So I would also like to hear you speak about the Belém Declaration and how it enters the Brazilian agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you, Camila, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in Industry Day, and more than Industry Day, it's the day that we launched the Belém Declaration, which, as has been said by different participants of the panel, I think really symbolizes the messages that we are all trying to convey here. Indeed, we do have some similar circumstances than the ones that have just been described. We have a very clean energy matrix, and we also have a lot of tradition with biofuels. We did that transition 50 years ago. I was actually told that the anniversary is 50 years today. I didn't know that, but ProAlco, which is the program that helped us transition away from fossil fuels 50 years ago, was launched on this day in 1975. So we do have a lot of tradition, we do have a lot of experience, and the challenge now is how do you leverage that experience, that clean matrix, in order to promote an industry that's both green and inclusive. That's the challenge that we face, that's the challenge that the region faces, that's the challenge that Africa faces as well. There is a first part of this equation, there is national, of course. So we do have a national policy on we don't like to say reindustrialization, so we call it new industrialization because yes, we need those good industry jobs back, but we are not doing it the same way that we did it in the 70s. We are now acting through a paradigm of decarbonization, bioindustrialization, technology that's dense, that adds value here in Brazil. So we do need those green industry jobs that pay high-paying jobs here in Brazil. We have that strategy in the New Industry Brazil. We also have a national decarbonization strategy for industry, which is being launched in COP, and it's anchored in 4 different pillars. So first, you need R&D, of course. Second, you need finance because the investment is huge, and it's not only in the industry itself, but also in the infrastructure that enables this industrial development. But then you also need reliable feedstock for green feedstock, and you also need markets. And those are both national markets and international markets that are capable of absorbing the green products that this decarbonized industry would produce. This is the policy we're launching here, and we're very optimistic in terms of implementation because it was designed together with the 6 hardest to abate sectors, the 6 sectors that have the most emissions in Brazil, which are, I'm not going to name them because I might forget one and that would be very ugly, so I won't do that, but it's glass, it's steel, it's aluminum. It's not only the industries that have sustainability and biodiversity as the core of their business, like cosmetics, for example. No, we're actually decarbonizing the chemical sector, for example, which is a lot harder. And through that decarbonization strategy, we have to use it as a stepping stone to design international markets for those green products produced in Brazil and produced in the global south. So the second piece of my speech here today is to think about what has to be the international governance that values those products coming from the global south with countries that have clean energy matrix. The Ministry of Finance of Brazil has been launching a strategy that seeks to integrate different carbon markets that are anchored in a common understanding and a common governance. Why? Because if we leave the governments of carbon markets for the developed countries, they're going to do it their way. And they don't consider scope 2 emissions, for example, because they don't want to incentivize production to shift to countries that already have a clean matrix. So they require additionality, for example, which is absurd because it punishes people who have already made the transition, and in the current state of the world is also very anti-distributive. So we have to think about a global governance in terms of carbon markets, but also in terms of industrial policy that recognizes scope 2 emissions as positive for the climate and for the people. Same with biofuel. Food versus fuel is not an issue in Brazil. We have degraded land that can be converted to producing biofuels, and we actually have technology to produce biofuels while recuperating land. So we're really not taking land away, we're adding land, and we are capturing carbon on the way. And we can cooperate within the region to strengthen the markets for those products, but also to ensure that politically, in the international level, when we're talking in the UN forums, the region speaks with a loud voice and has an alignment with the global south to make sure that the standards that are gonna rule the whole world are not those of the developed world, but are those coming with a global south perspective. That's what the Belém Declaration does. That's why we're thrilled that already, I think it's like 30 countries now because it's growing. 30 countries have signed on, and this includes both developing countries, diverse, Tuvalu, for example, Namibia, Brazil, but also developed countries that are willing to come on board. In Europe, we have the UK, we have Germany, and we're thrilled that we're having that momentum shift and really recognize that a global south perspective is needed for green industrialization. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and congratulations on the Belém Declaration. I know that both the Ambassador Ali and Julia have commitments very, very soon. So what I will do is finish this round with Ivan, open up very quickly for questions from the audience. Then I will return to Ambassador Ali. He will respond first and leave the room. And then we will continue with Julia and Ivan. I know Julia has also a ceiling at 5:15, so we will do that very quickly. Ivan, you are coming from a smaller developing country, which I assume faces even more challenges, but you also have been identifying economic opportunities in the climate transition, as well as instruments that, innovative instruments that can be used there. And so I would like for you to tell a little bit about the experience the Dominican Republic is having in trying to reconcile climate and development goals.
Thank you, everyone. I think it's really hard to be the last one, but I will try to be very short. At first, I will say, okay, now better. First, I will say thank you for the invitation. It's a really good opportunity for us to show us what Dominican Republic had been doing in the last years. And first, we like to start. For us, the key is to start treating climate and industrial policy as separate agenda. We think that the only answer to that question is try to work directly together in one only agenda. It's the climate and industrial agenda, and also apply for every other policy, as my other colleagues have said before. And we start this argument with three fundamental building blocks. The first one was that we start with the shared definition of what green means across the economy, and we do that with the Ministry of Labor, the Infotep, and also some other institutions starting working what is green job, what is green activity, and what is green investment. In the way of green investment, we were working directly with the financial institution to have our first green taxonomy that included several activities from the sector of the Dominican Republic. And I think it was really important for us to have everyone together talking about what is green for us in every age of these activities. The second is align industrial policy with climate finance and sustainable standard. I think it's really important. I think one of my colleagues before said that without finance, we cannot talk about this industrial change. So the Dominican Republic have been working in this instrument, and also we are going to launch tomorrow our first a platform from the Dominican Republic. Is based in the one that Brazil have, so we are going to learn a lot of what Brazil have been doing in the past year. And we are trying to connect every institution in this platform to try to connect this instrument that we need to spend in climate finance and sustainable standard. And the third is building climate finance architecture that support a structural transformation. As I said before, recently we just secured the GCF readiness we're going to launch tomorrow for the country platform climate finance. And we are very happy for this process because we are going to align green industrial policy, skills development, tax incentive, and climate finance operate as one. I think it's very short, but I will continue with the other things later.
Thank you, and thank you for the brevity also and keeping it on time. So we just heard that Ambassador Ali needs to go back to negotiating room. So I will give him the microphone for final words. He leaves the room, and then we open up for questions.
Well, thank you very much. Let me again appreciate ECLAC and the organizers for inviting us here. I want to particularly thank Open Society Foundation. They are a great partner who are supporting us currently on the whole Green Industrialization Initiative. We are in the process of developing continental green industrialization roadmap within the AGI. We are working, of course, with the Africa Free Trade Organization. As we talk about industrialization, of course, we need to discuss the whole issue of trade and access to trade, the trade accessibility and so forth. We need to discuss the whole issue of partnership, international partnership, and international financial flows. And so all these are interconnected in a number of ways. And so as we discuss green industrialization, we are also pushing for open trade policies. I mean, not open 100%, but of course, accessible trade policies so that whatever you produce, whether you do it in Africa or you do it in Latin America, does not get stopped. As you are aware, some of the discussions in the negotiations is the whole issue of unilateral trade measures. And these are all interrelated. And so we are pushing the agendas in the negotiation rooms as we continue to improve and invest in the green industrialization towards global decarbonization. And we invite all and sundry to come and take advantage of the potential and the opportunities that is available in Africa and in the global south. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we want you in that negotiation room over there. So please represent us in there. Thank you for joining us. I will open up for a round of questions. And please from the audience, and then we can have Julia and Ivan for a few more minutes. Pepe.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you very much to the panelists. Very interesting discussion. My question is for both of them, and probably more for Julia, because you were mentioning two dimensions, no? When you look at the green transition and green transformation. The domestic and national one, which is very important, and it's entrenched the new policy that the government of Brazil is putting in place, and on the other one, the multilateral dimension, which is basically part of the consensus, the declaration of Belém that you announced today. Then we had the ambassador from Kenya that was discussing in a very clear way the regional dimension, how Africa is facing the green transition from a continental point of view, in a parallel way with the growth of the African Union, the ACFTA, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to know, how do you see these from a perspective of Latin America? How the multilateral effort that Brazil is putting, for example, in the Belém Declaration, goes hand in hand and reinforce maybe the consensus of Brasilia process, and how the regional dimension can somehow complement the multilateral one. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? We can collect a couple. Okay, so I will take my role as moderator and ask you one. So the ambassador was mentioning the need to work together in investment and trade, but I want to focus on the investment part. China has been increasing a lot the level of foreign direct investment in clean tech, particularly EVs, everywhere in the world. Some data from our partners in the Net Zero Industrial Policy Lab showed that actually the Chinese companies are investing more in clean tech than the total of the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, now. And these are companies, right? This is not a central government deliberated strategy, but it's still more in FDI volume than what the Belt and Road Initiative represented. So that's very significant money coming to other countries from Chinese companies. And the question here is what do you see as the opportunity and the risk of that? I know Brazil is facing some of the challenges. It was able to have good negotiating terms when the Chinese BYD company established itself in Bahia by setting up R&D locally, for example. And what do you see as the role for coordination in establishing those standards and those conditionalities in return for Chinese investment in our countries that can guarantee that jobs are created, that technological development is localized, and that the overall society benefits from these investments?
That's a very hard question, as you know. No, but the good news is that's not a new question. We have always faced that dilemma ever since we're talking substitution of imports in the 60s. We need to think in ways to, yes, get the benefit of FDI, but also to make sure that those jobs, those tax revenues, also come with some technology transfer. And I think China gave all of us a lesson on how to do that, because that's the strategy they used to make their own development leap. I think you're right, the BYD deal is a good template, because we were able to have some agreement on shared technologies and a bit of R&D that would happen in Brazil. Also, we have to make sure that the products, be it BYD or whichever industrial products, are not only assembled in Brazil, they actually have to be produced here so that we will have those the benefits of adding value here. And we have to ensure some level of national content in terms of the feedstock, in terms of the value chain. So how do we ensure that it's not only the cars that are being produced, but also the machines that produce the cars, but also that steel that goes in the cars, the plastic that goes in the cars. Anyway, and then afterwards, there is the whole part of circularity. So when those cars finish their useful life, what's going to happen to those components? Can we also foster a recycling industry here? I think we can. I think we already have one that's pretty strong, and we can scale that up. So that would be my tentative answer, but we are all seeking path. And in terms of regional cooperation, that's a place we are behind, I believe. Africa has been showing us the way. We do have a lot of tradition in terms of Latin American cooperation, so I don't see why not. And we have to think about what would be regional cooperation in the 21st century. Again, that's an answer I don't have, but that there's a lot of potential that needs to be explored there.
Thank you, Julia. Ivan.
Well, I just want to add some quick a step to the answer that Julia had said, because I think the only thing that we need to be secure after all that she said is how can we get involved to the SMEs to this process. And I think this is a good question that our economists need to answer, because the major of our economy is based on SMEs. So we need to integrate these SMEs to this regional value chain. And I think that is a good opportunity for us to focus this cooperation with these SMEs that can be assimilated with these regional value chains. And also is a lot of technology transfer in this in every investment that this company putting in our countries, but we need to secure that SMEs are involved in this process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will wrap this up. I think we were able to get some lessons. I would suggest to our Latin American panelists that I think the African Green Industrialization Initiative that Ambassador Ali was representing here provides with a good starting point for that regional integration challenge in terms of setting up specific sectoral clusters that have been identified collectively by the countries as showing potential complementarities that can be explored, so that you go beyond competition to also think about specific ways to coordinate. Thank you so much, everyone, for a great panel this afternoon, and thank you, my colleagues from UNIDO, CEPAL, UNCTAD, and UNFCCC, and ILO, and UN Women, everyone, for putting this together. Thank you so much.